Colleagues, this meeting of the Board of Internal Economy will come to order. We begin with the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any concerns about the minutes of the previous meeting? Hearing none, we'll go on to the next item, which is business arising from the previous meeting. Any business arising from the previous meeting? Not hearing any, we'll go on to number 3, the Parliamentary Precinct Long-Term Vision and Plan. And presenting on this morning, we have Stéphane Aubé, Chief Information Officer, Suzanne Colba, Senior Director, A&L TPP Program Management Directorate. And they'll tell us about who else is with them. Monsieur Aubé.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll go directly to Susan. Susan's going to be leading the presentation. I'll be leading the second part after this.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're here to give you an update on the vision, the long-term plan, particularly about West Block.
On the progress of the West Block and Visitor Welcome Center Phase 1. And we're here, we had agreed to come back in March and update you again and talk about or give you an overview of the readiness for occupancy. So today we'll just talk a little bit about the context, give you the status update, address some key risks and mitigations, present a high-level move strategy, and conclude with a summary and recommendation. Essentially, the transition of the parliamentary operations for the Centre Block to the West Block is a historic milestone, and it's a complex web of moving pieces. The objective is to move for the fall session of 2018, and a decision on that must be really looked at given the context of risk. We want to ensure that the parliamentary operations are continuous and there's no interruption. The House of Commons is working very closely with PSPC and their construction manager to maintain momentum and to address risks as they arise. There's still a lot of work to be done. Work is progressing very well, though. We need to always understand that we need sufficient time for testing and for building familiarization once that construction progresses, and some IT integration and other systems integration. We have a robust governance with the parliamentary partners and other key stakeholders, and that's helping us stay focused and resolve issues as they come. In terms of the status, significant progress is made. The chamber is nearing completion. You'll see that the carpeting is going in, the chamber gallery seating is going in. Construction of committee rooms 1 and 2 is pretty much complete, and IT integration has started there. We've begun the long review process on deficiencies, so that's very good, and you'll see that a number of the offices are progressing to the point where furniture is being moved in. We hope that before the rise of Parliament, all major construction is completed. However, that doesn't mean that the project is finished. We need to address and integrate all the systems, IT, security, and such, continue to move furniture in and correct deficiencies. There's a lot of work and effort associated with that. There are key risks. The chamber remains still the most significant risk at this point. It's a complex room and it has a lot of integration that has to happen. We need to do a lot of testing and simulations to make sure that it'll be ready and operational and support the work that you do in the chamber. Other high-risk areas still remain committee rooms 3 and 4, some of the smaller meeting rooms, and full integration of doors and posts and security. Lower risk areas in the building at this point we feel are certainly the offices, things like the cafeteria and the Visitor Welcome Center. They're progressing very well. We're monitoring a couple of other key features like the temporary loading dock. We're working very closely, as mentioned, with PSPC to mitigate the risk, and some of that strategy involves prioritization. They're working with us we're identifying the key areas where we have a lot of IT integration and security integration, and they're prioritizing those to be delivered such that we can do some overlapping and continue to progress quickly. The ongoing monitoring of risk is really important, and we're watching the key milestones. The chamber is scheduled to be delivered complete April 3rd. And as we go, if risks arise, we're trying to mitigate them. However, as time progresses, it's important that we have the time to do that. On the next slide, essentially is a high level view of the move, and you'll see that starting in July is when we would start moving the desks from the current chamber and center block into the west block, progressing over the summer with essentially MPs being ready to move late August, early September in time for the fall session. So in conclusion, essentially, the West Block is a really exciting project, significant historic renovation, and it will be a fully operational building, a good home for the Chamber and the House of Commons over the next 10 years as an interim facility. Everyone is working very hard and doing a fantastic job. However, at this point, we're not in a position to recommend a go, no-go as work is still progressing. We would like to recommend that we return to the board before the House rises this summer with further progress status and make a decision at that time for the go, no go. The other recommendation that we'd like to table is to defer a few items in terms of completion for the fall, and that would be Committee Room 4, the temporary loading facility, and a few of the small meeting rooms.
Monsieur Rodriguez, vous avez une question, un commentaire?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci de
Very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witness for the presentation. Now, there seems to be quite a lot left on the to-do list, and the risk factor seems to be quite a bit there, too, to be concerned about. And one of the items mentioned at the end of the works does not signify that the facilities are ready to be used. So we're finished with the construction, perhaps, but it's there's still some testing, validation, whether it's acoustic or security or this. The acoustics in here today, for example, I can hardly hear anybody today. Today it's particularly bad, I guess. Yeah, well, we talk. That's what we do. It's our business. So we have to be able to hear each other and understand each other. So I have two questions. Well, I have a comment first. I sincerely hope, just as I hope that things get done as efficiently and quickly as possible, I hope that we don't just rush to a deadline just because we said we would. Let's do what's feasible reasonably. Let's make haste cautiously. Security, particularly, is a concern. And the usability of the facilities, that the acoustic tests be done, and if they're not up to scratch, that you do whatever you need to do to mitigate that and make them work. There's a number of items that seems to be fairly high risk. The integration of the security post, the doors, sally port, I don't know. This is essential. So my comment, as I mentioned before, let's not just rush because we have a deadline and we have to meet it come hell or high water. My question, the acoustics, particularly due to past experience, we know what it's like in some of these rooms. How are your tests working? How do you ensure that it reflects reality, that it's a good simulation of a room full of 300 people?
There are 3 planned acoustic tests for various reasons, and they happen at different phases during the project. So the first 2 have been completed. The first one was successful. We're waiting on results of the second test. Third one is scheduled for mid-April. And then further on, once all of the IT integration is complete, the furniture is in, of course we're going to run full dry run simulations of a chamber sitting, and we will further refine any requirements that aren't being met at that point.
Si je peux rajouter, M. Rodriguez, votre commande.
If I may add to your comment, Mr. Rodriguez, we have the same concern as you do. We want to deliver usable space that works well, is functional, seamless. And if we see that the risks are a little too iffy, we'll come back to you and we'll get your go-ahead. But we want to deliver the goods in the best operational capacity possible. We're looking at something that is going to be magnificent, and it has to be equally functional. On the acoustic issues, we've hired the best we could find, worldwide renown. We measured the acoustics in the house. We established higher standards than what currently exist, and we're going to be really rigorous about getting to those. We haven't done it in the committees yet, but we've tried it in the chamber, and the outcome, the numbers we have exceeded our expectations. A number of other tests, of course, once it's furnished, it'll change the acoustics, and we will redo the tests. Mr. Strahl.
Thank you very much for the update. I think anyone that has done a renovation of any building, I've done one in my home last year, and you're rarely finished when you think you're going to be finished. I'm a year past my completion date and still putting up baseboards. But look, I think it is worrying when the go no go previously was this month. We are now, when we were supposed to be making the decision whether this was going to happen or not, has now been put off to September, and so we're 6 months. I think that's what it says here. Return to the BOIE and to seek a no-go decision for September 2018. So we pushed that back 6 months now. So I guess my question is, obviously the space is working. Center block, obviously there are things that are not being done now, routine maintenance and repairs that otherwise would be if we weren't leaving the building. However, it's still functional. We are still operating every day here. I guess one question is, what is the risk, or what is the cost to simply recognizing that this is going to take some more time? And we all we are operating on an electoral cycle. You're operating on a building cycle. I know it's different, but I guess what is the cost to just making the call sooner rather than later that this is going to take longer than we thought, and we should do this at the next election? The second question I have is regarding to the slide that on page 8 of my document, where essentially the move schedule is looking for starting next Monday, that the party whips will start allocating spaces to center block MPs who will have to move to other buildings. I hope we are not envisioning a scenario where we do this halfway, where we're not moved into West Block, but we start moving people out of center into Confed. I would hope we are ensuring that the go, no-go includes those members of parliament and cabinet ministers that will be displaced, that they are not displaced in advance of the new chamber opening. So if I could just get some reassurance on that point, and then maybe we can talk about what is the risk, if any, to simply giving you more time.
So before we go to the presenters, I just wanted to point out two things. And the first is, if you look at the recommendations at the bottom of page 9 on the deck, it says return to the board before the House rises for summer break.
Seek a no-go decision for December.
Exactly. So the decision. So we'd make the decision here in say June about September, right? But that's the only. And the second thing is that the actual moves that you referred to, according to this, of MPs, ministers, and so forth, the earliest to those will be July 2nd. So obviously nobody moves until the board actually says, yes, we're going forward, right, under this scenario, okay? So now, Ms. Colbert, I'd like to go on with the other answers.
Yes, that's correct. So we, in meeting with whips to do space allocation, it's just part of the planning exercise. We would certainly just want to be prepared for the decision. Should it be going forward, then we're ready to only do the actual physical moving much closer to the summer, September timeframe. So really, the next little while is just about the planning of those moves.
Just so I'm clear, that this will be an all or nothing scenario, right? We are not going to have a scenario where we say, well, we could start moving people to Confed who aren't going to be in the new West Block. We can get a head start on that, or we can. I'm hoping that we don't go down that road. That we are saying this is an all or nothing kind of move. We all go together, or we all stay here. So.
Sir, any decisions of the move, any scenarios for moving would be brought back here, sir, for the board to decide. We're not considering a scenario where, currently we're not considering a scenario where we're moving after people in or out, but we would certainly not make that decision. We'd make the recommendation to this board, sir, and the members of this board will make that decision of what would be the move scenario based on some recommendations from us.
The point is that if we're going to have this building still open, we keep using this building.
That's right.
Right?
And as for the cost of the deferral, sir, your comment earlier, we'd have to put that question back to PSPC. We could come back at the next meeting when we come with the recommendations. We could come back and ask for solutions for that, but I wouldn't want to comment on that because it would be really linked to their cost of delaying the move of the building. If you want to, we'll come back with that at the next meeting. We'll take that as an action.
Okay. Monsieur Leblanc.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for the work. Excellent work, and you've been at it steady for quite a while. I sat on BOIE for a number of years, and I know full well the scale and scope of this project. I know what the cost is of any poor decisions, if you will. So I acknowledge and I salute your expertise. My question is a fairly straightforward one. I don't know if, through the chair, if you are the one to answer. I don't want to speak inappropriately. When we're talking about the move to the West Block, I know that our Senate colleagues are going to the former train station, conference center now. Talking to the colleagues talking to colleagues and talking to the senators, I don't know if you're aware of the details, but what I'm hearing back is some grumbling of some sort. Now, if we decide, based on your recommendations, that yes, we can in fact feasibly and correctly move in the fall, and the Senate decides for operational reasons perhaps, or security reasons, or any reason whatsoever, both houses, both chambers, upper house, lower house, have to agree to coordinate that date of a move. We have to move together. And they're doing their due diligence on their own side, of course, for their facilities, which is perfectly normal. However, informal corridor chats, they have certain concerns. How are we going to integrate both volleys of this move? If they feel that their new facilities are not yet ready or up to scratch, how are we going to resolve that? We are coordinating and collaborating quite closely, very closely with the Senate. And of course, as you said, we moved out and back in together or not at all. And unless I stand corrected, of course, by the administration, but if so, I would like to hear from them right now. No, that is the case. We are working in close cooperation with the authorities at the Senate side. It's an integrated partnership with all players on the Hill. The MO here is that both houses will move simultaneously. And or it's go or no go. It's all or nothing. And we are examining all the risks collectively together. Madam Burden.
I guess I'm just wondering, the thoughts of the other of my colleagues. From what I'm hearing, and I'd like to be corrected if I'm wrong, but the chances of us being able to move in summer of 2018 are very low. There's still a lot of work to do. So then if we think realistically, okay, we can't move 2018, so then would we move summer of 2019? But if we are 2 months away from an election, that would be kind of unrealistic as well, because there's going to be a whole bunch, could be changes, or there could be things, movement happening after the next election. So I just wonder if we should have a realistic discussion about that. That's one thing I wanted to mention. And then secondly, I think to Mark's point, again, unless there is even a reasonable expectation that there's going to be any changes in the next couple of months before you would come back to us, before we rise for the summer, why wouldn't we just make that call now? You know, what's the reason to come back? I'm just wondering about those two things.
Okay, you're in part asking the other members of the board, but you're also, I think, asking questions to the administration and Michelle. Yeah.
I think we're having a realistic discussion based on a plan and a joint document that we're working with our partners. Right now, we're tracking in a more granular way the various activities and key milestones that needs to be achieved for us to be in the position to move in September 2018. Right now, those key milestones, those dates, we're not there yet. So, for example, the chamber, they're supposed to be handed over to us on April 3rd. So, and there's many milestones in that nature that's going to happen in the coming months. And at that point, we'll be in a better position having our data to assess whether it's feasible. And we're talking about not just the construction. For us, it's a project in a holistic fashion. It's construction, integration of technology, and training and testing. So it's all doing in parallel. And obviously, we're now in the tight time frame because we're at the end of the project. And we need to do our due diligence exercise to make sure that the right decision is made and that you get the right advice based on the right information. And then we've been looking with Public Works at alternative scenarios if that date is not open. We're in discussion. Obviously, we're planning in parallel for alternative scenarios. Right now, there's two that are on the table, which is basically the Christmas break or the summer 2019 before the election. But those discussions are ongoing and going parallel. We're trying to achieve the move towards the goal in moving in September 2018. But definitely it's our view and our common view that we do not put the operation of the house at risk.
The other thing, of course, is that what decisions we make on this can affect the start of the work on Center Block, obviously, but I don't think the board's going to feel that that should cause us, to go until we are confident about West Block being ready for us to operate there fully. But I do have a question about what your comments about the summer of 2019, because it seems to me that following the election of 2019, obviously, you'll want in the center, assuming that we're in West Block at that point, there's going to be an office of the Speaker, of the opposition House leader, the various House leaders, the whips. I guess, whoever they are, right, I'm having trouble seeing whether there's a problem that I have to be concerned about because of flux at that time.
You know what, you're right. I was thinking there would be MPs' offices, but there won't be MPs' offices, will there? So then that's fairly consistent. It would be whoever the House leader is, Thank you.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Ms. Chager.
I just want to say I thank you, and I thank you for the reminder that it is us together who make the decisions. And I think it is actually quite beneficial that you are coming to us with updates because of the realities of the situation. And I would say it's refreshing to be made aware. I have full confidence in the work that you're doing and the expertise that you offer. I would just like to a friendly reminder that if we are too close to a date of moving furniture in, that you will want to test the acoustics, and if that doesn't go well. So I'm not one to debate hypotheticals by any means, but just a friendly reminder as a member of the team to make sure that we are aware of the need to test acoustics once all the furniture is in, and the reality is that that could go really good or perhaps be somewhat challenging. Thank you.
Okay, so it's now time. We're going to move now to discussion about the long-term vision and plan and precinct and security aspects of it, which requires us to go in camera and also to discuss some legal matters. So before we go in camera, I wonder if there's agreement for a motion that would say that unless otherwise ordered, each member of the board be allowed to have one staff member present from their office at in-camera meetings. En français, qu'à moins qu'il en soit autre.
Notwithstanding that it be decided otherwise, that each member would be authorized to be accompanied by one member of his staff when attending in-camera meetings. Is that agreed?
So now we'll suspend for a couple of minutes while we go in camera.